Hello everyone. The title that I have given to today's lecture is Politics of Draupadi Motif, Reinterpretation of Myth in Mahashweta Devi's short story. Tells when they transgress from generations to generations under the realm of varied cultures and possibly take numerous forms, become myths. In Archetypes of Collective Unconscious, Carl Jung says, I quote, myths are expression of the primordial images in the collective unconscious of man. In the beginning, man had certain experiences and received them in their psyche in the form of images. Since they are the first images, they are called archetypes of the collective unconscious. Unquote. According to Rolla Barthes, I quote, myth is a system of communication, that is, a message. This allows one to perceive that myth cannot possibly be an object, a concept, or an idea. It is a mode of signification, a form. Unquote. He adds, I quote, myth hides nothing and flaunts nothing. It distorts. Myth is neither a lie nor a confession. It is an inflection. Unquote. Myth transforms history into nature. In fact, what allows the reader to consume myth innocently is that he does not see it as a semiological system, but as an inductive one. All the dialectic of the past gets forgotten, and the signified and signified have, in his eyes, a natural relationship. In the 1940s and 1950s, many American women writers turned to myths as a means of redefining women's culture and history. Just in post-war society, the definition of what was prototypically feminine became problematic. So, in post-war writing, women utilized mythic symbols to defy traditional ideas of the feminine. They carefully noticed that women in mythology are documented and discussed, but generally from male perspectives. Therefore, a great range of myths needed to be found, scrutinized, and reinterpreted from a feminist perspective. Feminist critics like Mary Daly, Annie Spratt, and Kathy Davidson have departed radically from traditional criticism by utilizing myths and tried to isolate messages, what Rolla Barthes calls a signifying system. The core of feminist myth criticism is the refusal of existing mythical representations of gender and an attempt to find new literary vocabularies often drawn from psychoanalysis. Through the critical angle of the mentioned theories, this paper and this presentation aims at projecting Draupadi as a subversive female figure against the continuous repression of women perpetrated by patriarchy. Since the age of Mahabharata, Draupadi remains the face of every woman's struggle and resistance to forces that throttle woman's desire to express her individuality. She is a woman who has traditionally challenged the notions of womanhood. She is counted amongst the five satis in Indian myth. She is trapped in her eternal search of love, herself, and the struggle to maintain her integrity. She is part of a cultural fabric where daughters are not named after her, though intrigued and curious about her. Since time immemorial, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, the two great Indian mythological epics, have so drenched the Indian heart with their elixir that a number of versions of these two epics have been composed over centuries. The characters of the epics have become an inseparable part of the Indian life, so much so that they don't even seem to belong to a distant past anymore. This aspect of myth is indicated by Claude Lévi-Strauss when, in the Structural Study of Myth, 11th chapter belonging to the third part entitled Magic and Religion of Structural Anthropology, published in 1963, he says, I quote, myths are still widely interpreted in conflicting ways as collective dreams, as the outcome of a kind of aesthetic play, or as the basis of ritual. Mythological figures are considered as personified abstractions, divinized heroes, or fallen gods. Whatever the hypothesis, the choice amounts to reducing mythology either to idle play or to a crude kind of philosophic speculation. Unquote. Dopdi, the female protagonist belonging to the Santal tribe in Mahashweta Devi's sensational text Draupadi, is a refurbished and demythicized incarnation of the epical Draupadi. In her reincarnation, she is framed within contemporary and historical contexts where her inheritance is shifted to Champabhumi of Bengal from that of Panchal in the epic, and her current status is described to be that of an activist of the Naxalite movement of the 70s in the northern part of West Bengal and also a fugitive on the run from the police. Dopti is a gendered subaltern. As a woman belonging to the lowest strata of the economic class, she in turn is subjected to double subalternization. Her oppression level is further deteriorated by the atrocious dealings of her caste. Mahashweta Devi alters the heritage of social patriotism by rethinking the tale of one of the most impressive female characters of Mahabharata, Draupadi, in her story Draupadi. She dislodges Draupadi from her place in regal realm and spots her into the woods territory of the Jharkhani belt as a tribal lady. Mahashweta rethinks the terrible occurrence of Draupadi's disrobing, one of the popular scenes of this socio-cultural text. In contrast to her legendary namesake, Mahashweta Devi's Dopti gets stripped in obscurity and awful wild universe of a wilderness where no divine power acts the hero. She gets caught into a circumstance where she is compelled to act for herself. Physical savagery, boisterous attack, and different types of animosities have consistently been consolidated as instruments to control a woman's body. It is consistently the woman's body that is both the object of want and the subject of control. Dopti, as she is caught, tormented, gang raped, brutalized, all as the night progressed, neither expects nor gets salvation from any quarter. She doesn't wash, nor permits the attackers to dress her the following morning. By forbidding her torment, assault, and exposure to scare her, and rather by utilizing these as weapons to affront and frighten the adversary, Dopti rearranges the entire arrangement of implications that the epic depends on. This specific scene of Mahabharata allocates rape and bareness, that is, disgrace, misfortune, and dread, to unite the controls of influence. Mahashweta's Dopti interestingly turns around the semiotics of these signs to manifest a feeling of bewilderment, incomprehension, and alarm among the male-dominated cultural chains of importance. Dopti's rebellion is total and is unsupported or mediated by any awesome male force. The legendary Dopti's ask completely requests this heavenly male capacity to act the hero. Draupadi of Mahabharata seems to be a hapless, vulnerable female figure urgently looking for help from paternal powers in her pickle. Then again, we have Mahashweta's challenging Dopti, who develops out as a solid female who is brimming with life and sense of pride and never looks for help from anyone. She is herself too self-overwhelming to let the male-centric standards of profound quality to oppress her, and henceforth reclassifies the acquired male-centric development of the concept of sexual honor of a lady. She challenges the legitimate condition of the country that sustains viciousness and dread through its vessels. Gang raped by police, Dopti firmly denies to be addressed or to be dressed by those men in uniform. In her re-portrayal of Draupadi, Mahashweta not just confines her name Draupadi is desanskritized and vernacularized to Dopti, yet additionally indigenizes her area. Her Dopti is a sovereign of wilderness, a posterity of natural force, and hence her affection for freedom and disregard attempts to control and curtail forms an indispensable part of her basic instincts. Shenanayok, a representative of modern patriarchal world order in the story, while supporting Dopti and her motivation in principle, attempts a total pulverization of the resisting object in practice. After disrobing Dopti with his strategies of maneuvering, Shenanayak orders her making. Dopti's abuse doesn't stop short at the dignified, refined limits of an attempted Vastroharan, an act of forced disrobing of the epic variety. It entails an absolute making of her exercised over a billion moon, a million light years. Draupadi as a short story beautifully outperforms the epic in terms of the ravages which are incorporated as well as borne upon by the victim. Unlike her mythological pet, Dopti doesn't seek any divine intervention in the court of a Maharaja. Rather, it is the wild space of a forest. Dopti gets no divine male rescuer. The janitors offer her a piece of cloth to hide after subjecting her to multiple rape throughout the night. Dopti, in the fit of rage, pours down the water, shreds the fabric, and glaringly will not cover herself up with the well-defined notions of shame and female modesty. Covering herself up would have been a reaffirmation and a fortification of the patriarchal mode of morality sanctified by the masculine ideologies that subjugate female honor and breach of woman's modesty and her subjecthood. Spivak reinstates the intensity of Dopti when she acts in not acting. Nonetheless, the viability of Dopti's opposition isn't the refusal to act, yet the refusal to act typically. She redefines the customary sexual honor of a woman when she comes out bare and goes up against Shenanayak. Not at all like the mythological Draupadi, she resists guilt, fear, shame, or servility that are typically associated with the discourse of her making, in shame and servility. Dopti challenges the ravager to counter her, and as opposed to bemoaning over the respectability, she strides ahead and strongly questions the masculinity of the so-called patriarchal construct. I quote from Mahashweta Devi's text, Draupadi's black body comes even closer. Draupadi shakes with an indomitable laughter that Shenanayak simply cannot understand. Her ravaged lips bleed as she begins laughing. Draupadi wipes the blood on her palm and says in a voice that is as terrifying, sky-splitting, "What's the use of clothes? You can strip me, but how can you clothe me again? Are you a man?" She looks around and chooses the front to spit a bloody gab at and says, "There isn't a man here that I should be ashamed. I will not let you put my cloth on me. What more can you do? Come on, counter me. Come on, counter me." Draupadi pushes Shenanayak with her two mangled breasts, and for the first time Shenanayak is afraid to stand before an unarmed target, terribly afraid. This blatant action of Dopti completely dislocates and belittles the disciplined resistance displayed by Draupadi's lamentations as she attempts to awaken the masculine powers of the great patriarchs in the grand Mahabharata. In this startling metamorphosis of the powerless tribal woman who confidently challenges the patriarchal power of a ruthless post-colonial nation-state embodied in character of Shenanayak is a true message to our society. Dopti confronts Shenanayak, collapses his false masculinist pride, and challenges him to counter her. Dopti appears like a victim, but her actions make her an agent. The binary of victim and agent fall apart as Dopti deftly violates from victimhood. As she stands insistently naked before her mongers, Dopti manages to wield her raped body as a weapon to terrify them. By refusing the disciplining power of shame scripted into the act of rape, Dopti becomes, in the words of Mahashweta Devi's translator, Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, I quote, "a terrifying super-object," unquote. The terrific characterization of Dopti proves two undeniable facts before the readers. The subaltern and oppressed woman can be represented in imaginative writing, and she can be represented as an agent. Thus, Mahashita Devi's Draupadi effectively dismantles Spivak's contention in her essay, Can the Subaltern Speak? That subaltern as female cannot be heard or read. In the representation of Draupadi, we have a subaltern woman who speaks aloud, literally and metaphorically, since her voice, I quote, is as terrifying, sky-splitting, and sure that makes her audible to the whole world. This unmitigated activity of Draupadi totally disengages and puts down the restrained opposition showed by Draupadi's groans as she endeavors to stir the manly powers of the incredible patriarchs in the fantastic Mahabharata. In this alarming transformation of the powerless tribal woman who unhesitatingly challenges the patriarchal power of a ruthless post-colonial nation state embodied in character of Shenanayak is a true message to our society. Draupadi stands up to Shenanayak, breaks down his false masculinist pride and challenges him to counter her. Draupadi seems like a casualty, yet her activities made her an operator. The binary of victim and oppressor fall apart as Draupadi deftly violates from victimhood. As she stands persistently stripped before her mongers, Draupadi figures out how to employ her assaulted body as a weapon to alarm them. By denying the disciplining power of disgrace scripted into the demonstration of assault, Draupadi becomes, in the expressions of Mahashita Devi's translator Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, a terrifying superobject. The tremendous characterization of Draupadi demonstrates two unquestionable realities before the readers. The subaltern and oppressed woman can be represented in imaginative writing and she can be represented as an agent. Along these lines, Mahashita Devi's Draupadi successfully dismantles Spivak's contention in her essay. The life of Draupadi reflects on the women of today. Stretched in all directions at home, at work, and as a social entity, women are expected to fill the gaps and adapt to situations, and yet the reality is that they must have fortitude and forbearance as it is demanded by patriarchal society. The time and again adaptation of the Draupadi myth takes the readers on the journey from the present to the past and invokes the question, is the situation any different now? The rewriting of Draupadi myth reminds us of Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner, where salvation of the mariner is possible only when an audience listens to his tale. Draupadi myth comes with the same plea of wanting to be heard. It is only when we hear her tale that we acknowledge her struggle. Thank you.